Hail, and well met, adventurers. I admit it's been quite some time since I've seen you around the keep. There's been many things happening this month, and it's been quite a circus, so to say. But I trust that you got my letter, and that there were no orphanages burned down, right? Actually, I must come clean. I do admit that I have spoken with the headmaster of the orphanage, and through an investigation, they have found some scorch marks on the side of the building. No matter, I smoothed it over and insisted that the rat problem is well and truly dealt with. Now that I'm back from my lengthy hiatus, I have a few stories to share with you today. Today's stories revolve around some more mature themes. So take this as a content warning to any or all who may be a little bit more affected by stories such as these. But I feel it's important to cover these topics. I want to strike the record clean in saying stuff like this does not represent the storytelling or TTRPG community as a whole. Unfortunately, there are some very large problem players that pop up every once in a while. And these stories are first-hand accounts of these happenings. I believe TTRPGs and tabletop role-playing games as a whole are ultimately cooperative storytelling experiences where people gather in camaraderie and friendship and with the goal of telling a really cool story. If you have characters that you love and you're passionate about, it is very fulfilling to have them act out a story or a narrative with your friends at the table. But problems can arise when there are people who are prone to enforcing their will upon others at the table. And as such, this is reflective of maybe how they go about other things within their life. Please understand that these are not reflective of these communities as a whole, and these are problems for most players when they pop up. These types of people who try to enforce their will upon others in a situation like these are not welcome at tables through the majority of the TTRPG community as a whole. From my experience, when a player like this happens to bare their fangs, show their ugly face, so to say, at the table, and their intentions become clear upon the actions that their characters are taking in-game, I have had GMs and other players in the past, in these campaigns, automatically shut down these people. And I know that not everybody is so forward with awkward social situations such as these. So, just know that I am not victim blaming or saying that they should have done anything different. That's not my place to say. So, with my warning aside, and my little thought on what storytelling and TTRPGs as a whole should be, without further ado, let us call the kobolds to fetch us our drink, and gather in the dungeon so that we may chew on these unsavory stories, and maybe spit out the few seeds that pop up in them. There. More fitting of the ambiance of these horror stories. So, let us conjure our portal to the site known as Pit. This story is titled A Problem Player is Kicked and Almost Ruins D&D for the New Players. Before I tell this story, let me introduce our characters. D. Dragonborn Ranger. B. An Ursine Barbarian. PP, a drow wizard and also the problem player of our campaign. Side note, as a narrator, the author of this story refers to the problem player as PP, and that's kind of weird for me to continuously say out loud, so I'm just going to say problem player whenever they have their abbreviation. This is a story about the second campaign I DM'd in 5e. It was a small group at first, with just D, B, and problem player playing. More joined later, but they're irrelevant to the story. For some background, we were all in a club together, and while Problem Player and myself had experience, The rest of the party was brand new and had never played an RPG before. I disclosed this to Problem Player. During Session 0, we sat together and rolled our characters. Admittedly, I should have looked over Problem Player's sheet better, but was too busy helping the other two with creating their characters. After session, Problem Player messaged me on Facebook, asking if he can have an NPC follower. I didn't see the harm in it, so I wrote up a stat block for one box follower and continued about my night. Session 1 begins, and due to being in the process of a move, I had asked the table if anyone had extra dice, to which Problem Players promptly handed me a black set of dice. This will be important later. Everyone introduces their characters, and then it comes time to introduce Problem Players. He doesn't describe 1, or even 2 NPCs. No, he introduces 5 NPCs. All he describes as drow breeding slaves that had sworn loyalty to him after he rescued them from the Underdark. This was the first of many warning signs. I was annoyed, but to keep from interrupting the flow of gameplay, I allowed it for the time being, and came up with ways to reduce them to the planned 1 NPC. They met a Warforged, who was a bookkeeper who invites them to his home. The party talks to him to discover his good friend has gone missing a few months prior on a business trip. Inside his friend's workshop, there's a puzzle with a clock, and before even looking at his notes, Problem Player shoves all the papers on his desk into his bag and refuses to let the rest of the party look. I keep dropping hints that maybe they picked up something that could help them, but Problem Player says he doesn't care and leaves to go to a tavern, forcing D and B to figure out this puzzle without any clues thanks to the wizard. Puzzle opens the door, and Problem Player says he rushes in there before everyone else, despite already leaving. They fight some constructs in the basement and find a diary. Session ends. By this point, everyone is having fun despite Problem Player's slight intrusive behavior, and I'm excited that they're enjoying the plot hooks and overall environment. The next few sessions go without incident, with the party getting arrested while drunk and making a deal with the head of the town's guard. This ends with them securing a boat and setting sail to the campaign's main city. Each session I used the same set of dice to Problem Player's request, but I thought he was being nice. Oh boy, I can kind of see how this is going to play out. Around this time, our little ragtag group of adventurers attended a Ren fair together with our club, and had a fun day drinking mead and attending other festivities when a drunken Problem Player approaches me laughing. Problem Player: "Hey man, you know those dice I've had you use the last few sessions?" Me: "Yeah?" Problem Player: "I gave you them because they're negatively weighted. Isn't that funny?" Me: "Ha, not really." I talked to him about that and the NPC situation. He seemed to understand, so we continued playing again for a few sessions without incident, aside from a few cases of metagaming from Problem Player. After settling into my new apartment, we decided to change where we hosted the games. B suggested we played at his house, so we did. Throughout the campaign, Problem Player had not only used his character to bully others into doing what he, and only he, wanted, but also more often than not would take everyone else's loot and hoard it to himself, leaving the rest of the party reliant on him for funds. This over time drove a massive divide between Problem Player and the rest of the party, who tried talking to him, to which every time he replied, "It's what my character would do." During one session, Problem Player went out to meet a friend for some Pokemon cards he had bought. He then proceeded to brag to the party with his friends about how many DMs he's got to rage quit, stating roleplay was unnecessary. "Your stats are all the roleplay you need," and listing off strategies on how to win D&D. It seemed at this point to me that Problem Player was only using the campaign to fuel his ego. My only goal with this campaign was to build a story and to have a blast with my friends. But as I'd soon find out, Problem Player was far from anyone's friend. After 7 months, we were finally ready to focus on developing individual characters. In campaigns, I usually give each character a few sessions where I focus on them, similar to an arc in a TV show. I do this to prevent main character syndrome, while also making each player feel important in their own ways. As such, I give them the plot hook for B's arc. Essentially, the Emperor who controlled the main city was planning on invading B's homeland. After failing to get an audience with said Emperor, B talked to the party about helping him fend off an invasion. Everyone seemed on board, everyone except for Problem Player, who refused unless B swore allegiance to him and kept repeating the phrase, "What's in it for me?" At this point, I'm pretty sure the whole table was done with him. Problem player and B got into a screaming match, so I decided to call for a 30-minute break to calm everyone down. After our break, the party decided to leave Problem Player in the city in the middle of the night after running a tab under his name. I'm sorry. After running a tab under his name to buy the necessary supplies. I thought this was only fair, seeing as the only reason the party was broke was because Problem Player kept stealing from everyone, including his own party. Upon figuring this out, Problem Player, out of character, lost it. He kept telling me to retcon the party stealing from him, threatening to leave if I didn't. It was then I finally stood up for myself. Me. Respectfully, this is my campaign. I don't have to do shit I don't want to do. Problem Player. Alright, when my food gets here, I'm leaving. Me. Okay, fine by me. When his food finally came, he stayed and his bluff was called in front of everyone, and the rest of the session went fine. I again attempted to talk to Problem Player about his actions, to no avail. After this, we held a few more sessions, but any time Problem Player did anything remotely cringy, everyone rolled their eyes. It was apparent that the mood had been spoiled at the table, and members of the party had messaged me to express their distaste for Problem Player, who had started to make DMing feel like a chore. It wasn't long after this that I kicked Problem Player, who proceeded to blow up on our club's group chat before leaving. After kicking Problem Player, everyone was a lot happier, and the campaign went on for another year and a half before concluding last week. While I'm at fault as DM for allowing Problem Player's behaviors to go on as long as it did, I'm beyond glad it didn't ruin TTRPGs for the rest of my friends. In fact, D and B both DM their own campaigns now, and I'm proud to see how far they've come as both players and people. Edit. I know a lot of this is on us for enabling him. Before this, I was very conflict avoidant, and this was made harder by the fact that we were all officers in a charity organization together, and we were worried about the effects table conflict would have on the ground outside of the game. Since this, I have learned to stand up for myself a lot more, and also learned to vet my players before allowing them at my table. End of story. I'm extremely glad that OP in this story learned to stand up for themselves and their table and their experiences that they want for TTRPGs as a whole. It's very important to learn where to draw the line with people like this. I feel I would have known exactly the type of person and character that Problem Player was going to be as soon as he said, I have 5 NPCs, by the way, they are breeding slaves from the Underdark. That is extremely distasteful and not welcome in any game I have ever been a part of. And just for all of you maybe new to the D&D or TTRPG hobby, that's not normal. And people like that shouldn't be welcome in the spaces. I feel that people have the freedom to create whatever characters that they want to. However, if they want to embody morality that feels that something like this is okay, maybe the person themselves is not worth having around the table. But that's just my thought on it. But who am I to tell you who to have at your table or not? Real side note, as not Silver the character, but Silver the actual human being behind these videos, these situations are super uncalled for, and people like this should not be welcome in the D&D or TTRPG community at all. If you're playing a character who you constantly have to say, but it's what my character would do, then maybe it's not the game for you. And maybe you should learn manners, social etiquette, respect. You know, I feel like a lot of times when people who play characters like these play these characters in these campaigns, they're treated as a free pass to act out these terrible fantasies that they get social repercussions for in real life. And we just shouldn't enable that, I feel. You know, I know that some people are socially awkward and some people have like some stuff to work on and maybe they don't get social cues. That's fine. If you know that person to have those type of disabilities or those type of social recognition issues, then you know them well enough to at least talk to them. However, if this person is really displaying some really negative morals at the table, maybe it's time to consider either kicking them or not being at that table, because we should not perpetuate people or players like this. But that's my thought. as a, 12 years playing D&D and TTRPGs as a whole, cooperative storytelling with my friends and stuff like that, I've just always had people who were really good about keeping that kind of shit out of their campaigns. So, that's just a side note, but sorry for the rant. This kind of stuff kind of gets my blood boiling, because TTRPGs and D&D as a whole, and this type of stuff, this hobby, is my passion, and I absolutely love it, and I think that more people should engage with these type of hobbies and these type of storytelling experiences, because not only do they allow people to express themselves in a creative way, but they really bring people together in like cooperative, bond building type ways, and they're just really beautiful to be part of. But anyways, let's get back to the video. That was weird. I feel as if I did not exist for a moment. No matter. Let us move to our next story. As a quick note, this story is not for fledglings, so viewer discretion, or listener discretion, is advised. This story is titled Terrible Experience for New Players. A few years ago, I played in a Pathfinder 1.0 campaign with a guy, GM, I knew IRL. We had 3 people who had never played a TTRPG before, and this was their introduction. Another guy we knew joined the campaign, making it 5 players, 3 of which were newbies, and the GM. So we started the campaign as slaves on a slave boat, apparently. None of this was communicated to us previously, which was fine on its own, I guess, but it started getting worse. Side note, as a narrator, you should always have a session 0 and make sure that your players are comfortable with starting off a campaign like this. I know that this can be a super touchy subject. We had no agency for the first 30 minutes. Things were happening, but he wouldn't allow us to react or do literally anything, because we were slaves. He was telling us what we did and how we felt for that half hour where he described what was going on. Ew, icky. The boat ended up crashing on an island, and we were finally able to talk and interact with each other. We were all practically naked. Super icky. With no gear, weapons, or armor. The other experienced player made a character who specialized in fighting with heavy armor, which he had from character creation, but the GM told us that the slave masters took all of our stuff and it all sank with the ship. We eventually head further into the island, and we come across a tribe of people living there, who have very crude weapons and armor they would allow us to use. Uh-oh. But the GM says that his girlfriend's character would have to sleep with the tribal chief in order to get the weapons. Oh, Jesus. So the GM made his girlfriend's character for her, and told her how to play her. Apparently, she was a slutty elf that was supposed to sleep with every NPC that the GM controlled. When she heard her character was supposed to sleep with the NPC, she agreed. Then the GM says that they need to roleplay it. What? He looks at all of us with a creepy grin and says, "This is about to get weird and awkward for everyone else." I thought he was joking until he started describing the guy taking off his loincloth and moving towards the girlfriend's PC. I interrupted and mentioned how this is really uncomfortable and you can just say they had sex, no reason to go into detail. Did we get those weapons and armor? He was kind of deflated after that. After we got some actual equipment, still no heavy armor for the other guy, we journeyed further into the island on some quests the villagers sent us on. The GM would weirdly have us roll for certain things using the wrong skill checks. For instance, he would make us roll knowledge, or history, or acrobatics for something that very obviously was a perception check. I'm pretty sure he didn't know the rules for Pathfinder and was just winging it. Anytime there was a skill check, he would always grab someone's character and see what skill was the lowest and use that skill for the roll, even if it made no sense at all. This eventually developed into just straight ability checks, many of which had DCs of 15 plus. We played 2 sessions of this, and he kept trying to sneak in the sex roleplay. But I would say, skip, loudly, so he wouldn't go through with it. We had a quote-unquote boss fight at the end of the second session. There was a prisoner we were sent to rescue, but she was unconscious between us and the boss. As we were approaching the boss to attack them, he had one of the newbies make an intelligence check. She was playing a half-orc with an intelligence of 10, so he automatically thought she was dumb. The DC was 18. What was this check for? It was to see if the half-orc was smart enough to not step on the unconscious prisoner and kill them. So since she missed the 18 intelligence check, she crushed the prisoner's throat accidentally and they died immediately, which powered up the boss, I guess? The GM put us in one of those fights we were supposed to lose, so an NPC could show up and save us at the nick of time. By that point, all of the players had checked out, and he kept having the NPCs talking with one another, while he was describing what was going on, not allowing our PCs to really talk or react to this NPC. I'm guessing this was his DM NPC. He never found out. I had a talk with the other players, except his girlfriend, and they all hated it. It turned one of the newbies, the half-orc that stepped on the prisoner, off of TTRPGs for good. She was also really against the sex stuff, but was shy and didn't want to speak up. I told the GM that nobody really liked it, and we didn't really want to play it anymore. He got mad and said I didn't let him GM the way he wanted to, because I kept stopping the sex stuff. I told him that I think that would have made things worse if I had let it happen. I guess maybe this might have been some fetish for the GM. His girlfriend didn't really seem into it. I think she was just going along with it, to be honest. It just sucks because this was 3 people's first time playing something like this, and it was terrible. End of story. As I said with the first story, people like this should not be enabled, and they should be kind of shut down. When they start showing their true colors, absolutely, they should be shut down. And it really sucks that we had some newbies, some beginners into this hobby that were exposed to this for their first time, and thus ended up being collateral damage in this story. But all I can do is say that this is not representative of the community as a whole, and you will hear that on repeat, just because I am covering horror stories here. So to anyone out there who has had a bad experience, keep your chin up. There are some great people and some great storytellers and some very wonderful players out there. And you may just find a group yet. Let us move on to our next story. As another small disclaimer, this one has mature content as well. So, fledglings be warned, cover their ears. This story is titled, Paladin Causes Half of the Party to Leave. Let me preface this by saying 2 of the people in this story most likely had mental troubles and probably couldn't distinguish what is and is not socially acceptable. I joined a campaign after posting a request for a DM in the D&D Discord. The DM was a very nice person and had created a very interesting world that I was excited to explore. The trouble started before the first session, as I noticed one of the other members were constantly throwing passive-aggressive remarks at the DM, mostly saying things about how the DM had set up the Discord server and the applications the DM was using, but I brushed it aside, thinking I was thinking too deep into it. I created my character pretty quick, going for a Dhampir rogue that I already had an idea for beforehand. The other party members were a wood elf paladin, variant human warlock, kobold cleric, and a half-orc barbarian. Session 1 starts, and immediately the paladin takes full control and is non-stop talking, even talking over the DM at some points. The DM is able to give us the first mission, which involves the party capturing an individual alive, which the paladin asks at least 6 times if they can bash their skull in, with the cleric offering to use Spare the Dying to keep the individual alive. At this point, 20 minutes have passed, and suddenly the warlock leaves the voice channel, and says in chat that he isn't enjoying the vibe, and leaves the server. The DM was a bit shaken for a minute, but continues on, the party all agreeing to head to a tavern to gather information. When we arrive at the tavern, the cleric immediately asks to run off and pickpocket all the patrons of the tavern, the DM for some reason letting him do so. Barbarian was upset at this, heading to the barmaid to get an ale, joined by the paladin. I had put my character to sit at a table until I had the chance to do something. The paladin and the barbarian ask for a drink from the barmaid, and instead each receive a scroll, the barmaid asking them to read it, which they both do. It was a charm scroll, and the barbarian failed his roll and was charmed, but the paladin passed, and the charm backfired onto the barmaid. The paladin was upset at first, wanting to resort to violence, but instead told the barmaid to give the barbarian a bunch of free ale, which she did. The barbarian took the ale and went to ask some other patrons for information, but the paladin wasn't done with the barmaid. SH warning. The paladin said he wanted to humiliate the barmaid for trying to charm him, so he told her to take off all her clothes and belly dance in front of everyone. The voice channel went silent for a bit, the DM hesitating, but decided to make the barmaid do a saving throw, which he definitely fudged to make her succeed. The paladin didn't seem to notice, and was upset that his request failed. The barbarian was upset at this, feeling bad for the DM, and told him that he left some gold on the counter for the barmaid, which immediately the paladin attempted to steal, and was successful, laughing that he stole the barbarian's money. After that, the barbarian asked to speak with the DM alone. We left the voice channel and waited about 5 minutes. Later, we rejoined. The barbarian had left. We were told by the DM at that point that the barbarian was his nephew and that he had set up this campaign for him, and the barbarian now had some personal things to deal with. The DM tried to seem excited still, and pointed out in-game that we should talk to people to find our target. The paladin took the lead and talked to a mercenary, who had the location of the target as he was hunting him down as well. The DM told the paladin that the mercenary was someone familiar, the paladin making a history roll to learn the mercenary helped and even fought against the elves in a war from years ago. The paladin started to irritate the mercenary with comments about he was not loyal to anyone, and that he should be ashamed, which the mercenary responded with a picture of his deceased high elf wife, saying that he fought for her until she passed. The paladin laughed for a bit, the DM unsure of what to do, until the paladin asked to make a persuasion roll to get the mercenary to join us, which he passed. After that, the mercenary reached to pull out a map to show us where the target was hiding. And lo and behold, it wasn't there, as the cleric had stolen it earlier. Instead of realizing his mistake and giving the map back, the cleric attempted to make a new, fake map with an illusion spell, leading to a 15-minute argument on how the spell works, ending with the DM giving in and letting him cast the spell. After that, the mercenary pointed out the target, and the party set off to the marked place to buy gear. And at that point, I decided to leave myself, as I was getting tired and hadn't been able to do anything as well. I did apologize profusely to the DM, and even said I'd love to join another campaign of his with other people. Sorry for a long post. Thank you for reading. Edit. I see a lot of people are arguing about subclasses for paladins. I should clarify that they chose Oath of the Ancients. End of story. I'm really glad that OP in this story was willing to join another campaign of that DM's with some different people. It really shows some tenacity for really wanting to be involved in this hobby, and it's admirable. I don't know, maybe I geek out a little bit whenever people are really into the storytelling and play aspect of D&D. But I do want to echo some sentiments that I was seeing in the comments on that particular story. That paladin should have become an Oathbreaker. I understand that Oath of the Ancients is a guardian of nature of sorts, but it was very much in the realm of capabilities of the DM to say something along the lines of, this is not fun-loving and this is not freedom, it is more malicious, and your character has become an Oathbreaker because of this. Furthermore, the paladin was forcing somebody to try to adhere to his wishes, and I feel that that kind of goes against some of the oaths that paladins take, just in general. I myself love paladins. I have actually played a few in different campaigns. Right now I'm running an Oath of the Open Ocean, which she has just become an Oathbreaker due to a very juicy story tidbit. But, without further ado, let us move on to our last and final story. This story is titled, DM Makes an Impossible Encounter, DMPC appears out of nowhere and saves the party. I was playing in an online D&D campaign at level 7. We had recently lost a player and were thus down to 3 players. We decided to take in another 2 to round out the party, and this story happened the first session we played with our new players. Party composition is as follows: fighter, a cleric, a paladin, who's the new player, a warlock, who's a new player, and druid, me. The party is traveling to a location we know the BBEG is keeping an important artifact at. Everything is going well until we get caught in a massive snowstorm. We can see quite literally only 5 feet in front of us, and lo and behold, we get attacked by something in the storm. Now, because the creature is using some sort of ranged attack, I think the DM said it was a tongue attack, we can't actually see the creature, and so we can't really attack it. We ask the DM if we can hear it, but he says the storm is too loud. So we roll initiative, and even though we try, we can't really get anywhere with this monster. Then all of a sudden, my character takes 18d6 damage, no save whatsoever. This is apparently because one of my magic items exploded. This drops me instantly, as my character's max HP had been reduced from 54 to 37 because of a nightmare hag. Fighter had also had his HP dropped from somewhere in the 80s to the 40s. The only people without dropped HP were Cleric, because she worshipped a god who protected her, which is weird because my druid also worshipped a god, and the new characters because they were, well, new. But alas, the 18d6 instantly drops my druid and was 1 point away from doing twice my max HP and just insta-killing me. Then, afterwards, Fighter has the same thing happen, except it's 24d6, and thus Fighter drops to 0. At this point, we're all kind of thinking, what the hell is this encounter? When the DM asks if we would like a certain blonde man to help us. This is referring to a DMPC with golden armor and blonde hair that the party has encountered before. He's a real cocky guy that no one in the party, both in and out of character, likes. We've met this DMPC a few times earlier, where he's basically just shown up and taunted us. The first time we met him, he actually killed my character with a breath weapon that did 48 damage, which was my max HP at the time, on a successful dex save. He hit me twice with the breath weapon and thus instantly killed me. The DMPC then casted True Resurrection on me, and he disappeared. The DM later told me it's because he felt bad for me, as I was newer to D&D at the time. Back to the fateful day. We plead to the DM not to bring in the DMPC, but he does it anyway. The DMPC instantly kills the monster, heals everyone, and dispels the snowstorm. He also for some reason makes Fighter knocked out and invisible, and no matter how much detect magic I cast, we're not allowed to actually find Fighter. I later found out that this DMPC is an overpowered anime character ported straight from the anime he came from. At this point, we end the session, and both our new players say that this isn't the right group for them, understandably. I ask to speak to the DM alone after the session, and I ask what the hell was that, and what were we supposed to do to win the encounter? He just kinda says variants of, I don't know man, and I forgot to look at your guys' max HP and abilities when prepping. I heard Fighter chewed him out after the session too. The good thing to come out of this is that the week after started a new campaign with Fighter doing the DMing, as he is very experienced with it, and so far we're having a great time. Warlock and Paladin even gave us another chance and joined the new game. Edit. After some googling, I found out that the DMPC in question is Gilgamesh from Fate Zero. End of story. I find that oftentimes DMPCs are another chance for DMs to just lord over players whatever fantasy that they want to push onto them. So most of the time, it's a very treacherous situation when you find your DM introducing DMPCs. However, I will put this disclaimer out there. The current campaign I am in real life, our DM has a DMPC, but the way he plays him is extremely courteous. This PC almost never incites actions, but it is also chalked up to the character's disposition in the game anyways. So it makes it a very player-led interaction anytime we interact with this DMPC. And I find that that is probably a really good way to go about that. Because oftentimes we hear DMPCs coming in as main characters, and it just ruins the experience for the players actually sitting at the table. So, chalk that up as another one that is not representative of the community as a whole. The majority of this community is very player-centered and very cognizant of the player's time and wishes at the table. And, like always, my advice is that if you find yourself at a table where a DM is constantly enforcing things on you that you did not agree to or did not want, maybe it's time to find another table, or find another group of friends if they don't support you. But that is all the stories that we have for today, so let us conclude our story session. Thank you so much for stopping back by the keep. I do so enjoy your company, and look forward to sharing more stories with you in the future. Horror stories or otherwise. The portal known as Reddit can be full of mysterious, exciting, enlightening, and creative stories that adventurers share. Alas, I speak too much. You have lots of adventuring to do, so let us take our long rests and replenish our resources, as you will need them for the morrow. Maybe go make sure those rats actually are taken care of. For my sake, at least. Maybe stop by the orphanage and explain that you didn't intend to almost burn down their building. Don't let me stop you from exploring the rest of the village. Just know that whenever you are in need of respite, you can always visit me here. Or at the other lairs that I occupy. The portals should be around here somewhere. Also, a new expansion to one of my favorite stories has come out this month. In fact, it came out a couple days ago. You may know it as Final Fantasy XIV Online, and the expansion is named Dawn Trail. So if you're interested in seeing some of those streams, you can tune in on Twitch, and then I will try my best to post the VODs here as well. But yeah, I plan on doing art fight streams and Final Fantasy streams most of this month, and going a little bit forward, I will be having more Final Fantasy streams, since art fight concludes at the end of July. It's exciting, and I'm super happy to be participating in my first art fight, but also Dawn Trail looks really exciting, so I'm glad for that. Thank you so much for your time, and may your wings sail upon pleasant winds. Until we meet again.